3 years ago at this time, former WCVB TV reporter Gail Huff and her husband, newly elected Senator Scott Brown, were off for the ride of a lifetime. Gail left her job at Channel 5 and got a part-time position at WJLA in Washington. Scott, as you all remember, was the most sought-after politician on the Hill. It all began with the race to fill the seat left vacant by the death of Senator Ted Kennedy. The run-up was fairly unremarkable. After a competitive primary, Martha Coakley broke loose from the Democratic field to face off against little-known Republican state Senator Scott Brown. At the time, very few people thought Brown had a chance. Then, presidential candidate Mitt Romney greeted Scott Brown and his wife Gail Huff and daughters Ayla and Ariana on stage. And suddenly the family was catapulted into the limelight.
Well, all you have to do is look at the ground to see the problem.
Gail Huff tried to keep her life in balance, maintaining their home in Rentham, juggling a reporter's job at WJLA in Washington, and keeping company with her husband.
You guys are asking a lot of questions, and I'm learning about it as you are.
Then, before they knew it, another race was on. This time, Scott Brown faced a more formidable candidate in a presidential election year. The Democrats swept the state, and Scott Brown out of office. And Gail Huff is here. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you very much.
I should say I know you well because I worked with you, and I think I actually hired you when we were back
many
at
years
Channel 5.
ago at Channel 5, yes.
I have so much curiosity about this. I mean, here you were, a very prominent public face in the New England area. Everybody knew you. You worked in Providence. You worked here in Boston. So you were a big TV star. Suddenly your husband gets catapulted to the limelight of the nation. What was that like for you? I mean, you were the celebrity in the family.
Well, I have to tell you, first of all, when Scott and I would go places, people would say, "Oh, this must be Mr. Huff," because I've always gone by my maiden name, Gail Huff, and he'd say, "No, my name is Scott Brown." And anyway, so when we got to Washington, I very quickly learned what it was like to be Mrs. Senator Scott Brown. Never called Gail, never Huff. Mrs. Senator Scott Brown. And even though I worked at the ABC station in Washington, D.C., I was still very much there as a Senate spouse. And it was a wonderful opportunity, but it was a huge change for me to go from working and living in the Boston area where I know so many people, where there is that recognition from nearly 20 years on Boston television and Providence and Hartford and Springfield, to being completely anonymous. Calling up, trying to get a story, an interview with someone saying, "Hi, this is Gail Huff." Who? And one woman, this really struck me. One woman said to me, if you really want to get somewhere in Washington, D.C., you need to take your husband's name. And I thought, that's really interesting that in, this day and age that we still have these perceptions that in order to succeed, there has to be, this kind of recognition.
Well, I know they took you weren't covering politics, but you must have felt torn because, I mean, I've worked in local in Washington and I went to school there, so I know the city very well. I mean, here you are a reporter, yet you're a senator's wife, and people want to be around you. I mean, not only the Washington hoi-polloi, but reporters, too. So do they try to get to Scott through you?
Yes, all the time. I can't tell you all the phone calls, all the emails, all the texts. Hey, listen, just wondering if you and Scott are going to be at such and such. I quickly learned it wasn't about me and that they were trying to get to Scott. And that's okay because I understood listen, I'm a reporter. I get it. I know how it works, and people use the connections that they have, and I don't resent that. But at times it was interesting. I mean, you'd be at a dinner party or congressional dinner with Chuck Schumer on one side and Mitch McConnell on the other, laughing about one thing or another, and the next day nobody's talking to each other. The dynamics could be very interesting. I might find out about something, 3 days before it ever breaks in the media. But I was very careful to keep a very, very, a firewall between my personal life and my professional life as a news reporter, and I always have.
How was it seeing it from both sides? And you were seeing it from both sides at the same time. I mean, Scott became a news figure. I mean, he was profiled by 60 Minutes, every magazine. He did the book, of course. How was it watching the coverage of him? And I know you love him, you're your husband, so you're sensitive to any criticism or something you think he got wrong. But Did you think overall it was fair? How did you feel that the news media treated you and him?
You know, it's interesting. The national news media treated him very differently than the Boston and Massachusetts media did. He was much more of a national celebrity than he was, ironically, I think, a Massachusetts celebrity. And I think part of that comes from just being a Republican in Massachusetts. Yeah. He's so outnumbered. And, you know, as a result of that, you know, he's held to, I think, a different level. I think there is a different scrutiny. I think there's a different test, you know, for a Republican than a Democrat. And I think a lot of that does show up in the news media. I think that he was at times a victim of that. All in all, you know, when you take into account the regional, the local, the national news media, I think that, you know, they painted a picture of him that for the most part was fair, but there were certain things that I had a lot of problems with.
Did you think that the media was partisan in one way or another? I mean, you always feel that, well, not as fair towards Republicans. Did you feel that way?
I can't say that I ever said, wow, he's being treated unfairly because he's a Republican. But there were times when I felt that he wasn't getting a fair shake or the same questions weren't being asked. Mm-hmm. And I do think that, you know, all reporters, and I'm a reporter myself, you know, you come into, everybody in life has certain ideas and certain preconceptions. And, you know, the number one preconception of Scott Brown from Massachusetts was, what is this guy, a Republican from Massachusetts who took the Ted Kennedy seat? Who is that? Mm-hmm. You know, so he was an enigma, and there was a lot of fascination with that. Sometimes I felt like it was unfair, and he could have done more if the media just left him alone, which he would have loved.
Which was never going to happen.
But wasn't going to happen.
Well, what was the Washington social swirl scene like? I mean, you two must have been at the top of the A-list for, you know, invitations.
The Washington nightlife scene is very active. There are parties all the time. A lot of the work, a lot of the political work gets done, you know, after hours, at cocktail parties, at dinners, you know, over wine or coffee. Mm. So it was interesting to see that, yes, as soon as we got there, we were invited everywhere, because that's what you would expect from a new senator. And because Scott was very bipartisan in his voting, both sides were always trying to get his attention. He voted with the Democrats almost as much as he voted with Republicans. So, I mean, he was constantly being courted by both sides. And, of course, the parties in Washington are very partisan. You either go to, it's Republicans at the party or it's Democrats at the party. And we would end up at both because of the type of senator that he was.
You had to get involved in some of the fundraising stuff, too. I mean, was that tricky for you because you were balancing your life as a reporter? But here, he's your husband. He's running for office.
Yeah, I never did any fundraising. Never participated, never solicited money, didn't attend fundraisers for the party. I campaigned for my husband, and I did political ads for him, but never did fundraising for him. If I went to somewhere, I was in public and someone came up and said, hey, I have a check for Scott. It's,
really?
Don't touch it. I have nothing to, you know, if you have a donation for the campaign or something, please see so-and-so, but I never did any fundraising.
You told me on the phone when I was convincing you to do this that you still felt mad about the results of the election last fall. Why? What is it about it makes you mad?
Sad, I guess, would be a better word than mad. I mean, listen, we have the best system in the world, democracy. The people spoke. They chose his opponent. I accept that. I believe that democracy works in its, you know, in every way. The sadness is that I was there for almost 3 years with him and saw what an amazing job he was doing at not only getting legislation through, but at bringing the parties together. You know, at getting Democrats to talk to Republicans and getting people to really, it's a dirty word in Washington, but compromise. And I saw that and thought he was the person that was best equipped to do that. So the sadness was that he'll never have the opportunity, likely, to have a full term. Where, imagine what he could have done in a full term.
He could have.
Could have.
Are you?
Oh, are you referring to John Kerry's seat?
No, yeah.
That would have been too much.
Tough.
Too much.
Just too tough.
Well, okay, you come off the loss.
People are lamenting the fact that he's not in.
And then you run again.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, let's say you win. You're in for less than a year, and you're up for election again. How many special elections can you run in? And you have to remember, for every special election, he has to raise $40–50 million.
Yeah.
I mean, that's more than most candidates in states have to run
in a lifetime.
In a lifetime. It would have been too much.
Do you regret that you didn't get in now? Look at, I mean, the field is definitely open.
It's an open field, and listen, I would have loved to keep the lifestyle we had. We had wonderful opportunities. We got to meet wonderful people, and we just had great, really fun opportunities there. But I'm happy to be home, and this is where I'm from.
Well, congratulations. You look great. So
thank you.
It's not nonetheless for wear for all of that. Gail Huff, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks.